everyone. Welcome to the September 4th, 2025 meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. I'm the Chair, John Larry, to my right. Also, commissioners, thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody else for your interest and for your attendance, both in person and online. We have some very important topics today to address, including the first look at the draft Consolidated Transportation Program, CTP, also culminating the Commission's work on the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, RTP. Those will be probably the two largest items, and then a variety of other items in the normal course of things. Let me, looking around, I just wanted to say that our Assistant Secretary, Tony Bridges, at MDOT has moved to a new role at the State Department of Commerce. So I'm sorry in a way that he's not here, but I will thank him on behalf of the Commission for all of his work, not only at the Commission, but in the department where he's really made a difference. As you know, he was a legislator, he was responsible for the legislation that led to this Commission, among all sorts of other ongoing discussions about the organization and functions of transportation in Maryland. So all of us who are interested in this owe Tony a lot. Wish him well in his new role. And also, although we'll be hearing from her, I want to extend a special welcome to Acting Secretary Samantha Biddle from MDOT. She's going to be presenting on the CTP and has told me that she intends to be the rep from the department whenever possible at these meetings, which would be terrific. Samantha, it's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and congratulations on the governor's confidence in you to be acting secretary. It's a hot time to be in that role, but we're really glad for you and for the state, and looking forward to working with you. So welcome. Okay, I think those are the preliminaries. Don, is there anything else in terms of administrative items that we want to cover at the outset?
Other than having folks stay on mute and we have public participation at the end. If they want to comment, they can raise their hand.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, well, our first agenda item is remarks from the MTA Administrator, Holly Arnold. Holly, please feel free.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody. Well, Don pulls that up. A couple of service. There's a couple of service impacts that I did want to address that are not covered in my presentation, and I'll dive in there. So first, and I really can't say a lot about it, but did just want to acknowledge and make sure everyone is aware that MTA was impacted by a cybersecurity incident about a week and a half ago. We're working closely with the Department of Information Technology to investigate and plan for restoration of MTA's full network. It is having some impacts on service. I do want to make sure everyone knows all of our service is running. So buses are out there, trains are out there, our paratransit vehicles are out there. Real time is the most impacted on the core network. So the signs at our light rail and metro stations are not working. The app does work for light rail and metro. On the bus side, real time is pretty heavily impacted. On any given day, we're able to get somewhere between 40 and 60% of buses reporting, but it really just depends on the time and what's going on. So our team is working to restore real time as soon as we can. On the paratransit side, we did have about 5 days where we were running our subscription trips and planned trips only. But last Friday, we were able to stand up an interim call center. So we're now taking calls. We've shared information with the Department of Disabilities, and we're working to kind of restore the stability of that system. So just impacts that we're having there, and continuing to try and kind of get back to normal operation as soon as we can. Also wanted to address impacting today. There was a fire at Fayette and Howard 2 days ago that impacted several buildings. MTA had to take down our service because we can't have firefighters up on ladders with our catenary when it's hot, because that's not safe. And so the way that our track circuits work, in an emergency shutdown, we had to basically be shut down between Patapsco and Falls Road. And so we ran a very long shuttle bus on Tuesday. Yesterday, we were able to change the track circuits. The team was able to get in and make that adjustment, and we're now running a shuttle bus between Camden and North Avenue. Baltimore City Housing is in there to stabilize the buildings, so they have to use cherry pickers and other things to kind of stabilize the buildings, and they're still on Howard Street. There's no other real place that they can do that from. So MTA light rail service is still down. We're working closely with them. We're hoping to be back up and running later today, but we are running the shuttle bus between North and Camden, and then the trains are running on the north and the south end. We don't have as many trains on the south end as I would like, so anyone coming from the south end, we're just limited by the number of trains that we do have, but kind of doing the best that we can with the equipment that we do have out there. I rode the shuttle bus yesterday. I was checking on the team. We have transit ambassadors out there. It was running decently well, but I know that it is an impact and it's not the level of service that we want to provide. And then finally, this weekend, the Maryland Cycling Classic is on Saturday. I believe the Baltimore banner described it as traffic-geddon. So it will obviously impact our buses as well. We have a number of detours that are planned, and we're putting together a website that should be going out to let riders know what to expect. That said, it's gonna be really bad on-time performance because our buses are gonna get stuck in all the traffic that's happening. So just flagging that those are some service impacts that we're having at the moment.
While we're working on probably there, but first of all, I just wanted to say, I was meeting with MTA and MDOT on Friday when cyber incident was happening, and I just know how hard you all have been working, and how difficult it is. You've got people really dependent on the service, paratransit, et cetera, and everybody else, and I just want to commend you for, I know how hard you've been working on it. Obviously, it's something that happens from time to time. You try and prevent it, but then in a way, the real test is how well you cope with it if or when it happens. So thank you for doing that. And then with respect to the Howard Street and all that, I mean, I think people just have to, people understand it's a crisis and adapting as best you can. So are there questions about any of that for Holly? Are we not getting there, Don? Are we not there yet?
Yeah, I'm having an issue with the.
I think we have hard copies, although I know that won't be great, but we can get there. But first of all, while Don continues to work, are there questions for Holly about anything she's reported on, or frankly, anything else that might be on your mind that you wanted to answer in terms of just administrator reports? This would be a good time. Okay. All right. Well, let's move. Holly, we have the commission has, and I apologize to people watching, but I think in the case of these slides, where they're really helping your narration, I think we can manage. So in the meantime, can we, do you have a hard copy?
I'm gonna
Here you
grab
go.
my own hard
You got it?
I know it well, but I don't have the order memorized.
So in your folders, there's a administrator report, two pages stapled together.
Yes, and for folks in the room, there's some over there.
Yeah, if you're right. I think this will be followable.
So just diving in, MTA did implement our fall service change that went into effect August 24th. So not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. Did make some kind of major changes to the network in terms of the Quick Link 40. It's been extended to CMS and to Fox Ridge. We added some additional trips on the Navy, the 28, the 30, the 103, and the 154. As well as some extensions on the 63 and 34. It's about a 2% increase in service levels compared to fall of 2024. And we're also really trying to make sure that folks know what's going on. We're participating in student outreach, back to school events. I think you probably, if you follow us on social media, you've seen us out there a lot trying to get to as many people as we can so they understand how the system works, answer any questions that they might have. Normally at this point, I'd be able to tell you how things are going, but because we don't have access, we're still trying to understand, on-time performance and whatnot with the new network. So we're working some workarounds there so that I can report out on how the service change is actually going.
If you have questions on these topics, just feel free to raise them as we go rather than wait till the end. Are there any just jump in, be fine.
Okay, next is the fare policy. I did talk about this previously. Our new fare policy went into effect July 27th. It really is focused on increasing access. So right now, any kid 12 and under rides for free. Baltimore City school students ride anytime using their student pass, and we are partnering with Baltimore City schools on the ID process so that students are able to flash and show their IDs. We're also working with them on a pilot for Charm Pass so that students using their Baltimore City school email can get Charm Pass on their phones and be able to use Charm Pass. We're really pushing to have everyone showing a fare product in a way that maybe wasn't happening before. And so that's a good partnership that we're working with them there. We did add similar to Mark, where if you don't buy your ticket at the station and you buy it on the train, there's a $5 surcharge. So we're doing the same thing on light rail, and our fare inspectors are trained and are working through that. We extended the transfer window to 2 hours, and we did get approval to start a low income fare program by the end of the year. So the team is working on that. We're gonna mirror it off of what other transit agencies has done, PRT in Pittsburgh, WMATA. Essentially, if you're SNAP eligible, you would be eligible for the program, and we're working closely with WMATA to get their programming for it so that we can implement. We are also replacing fare boxes on our buses. They are very old, they don't often work, and so the new fare boxes are out now. There's a few of them out of our Northwest division that are in service, and we're gonna continue to roll those out.
I have a quick question on that, just in
Yes.
terms of the additional fee if you're on. Is the idea that, yeah, just talk me through that, because in some ways, self-service purchase is, you know, less of an impact. Is it more that they're already on and we don't know where they got on and when they got on as to length of trip and that kind of thing?
It's essentially, I mean, so previously, if someone was on without paying their fare, we would just kick them off at the next stop.
Okay.
And so we're trying to recognize like, okay, you're willing to pay the fare. you
Yeah,
can do
that's
it.
what I was looking
Yeah.
at. Okay.
Yeah, and it's through the Charm Pass, the fare inspectors are working with them on that. Honestly, people can also, if they see a fare inspector coming, could quickly buy it in advance. Like there's
Exactly.
lots of options there for
Okay.
folks to do
Yep.
so.
Okay, thank you.
But if they choose not to, we're somewhat penalizing. That's trying to
Again,
incentivize paying.
the old way was that we would kick them off.
Yes.
And so now you have an option to stay on if for whatever
If you're willing
reason
to
you
pay.
didn't. Okay, got it.
How's the low income fare? How do you implement that? I'm just kind of curious too.
So we're taking similar to what WMATA has done. So basically, if you're SNAP eligible, you'll be eligible for either a 50% or like a fully reduced fare. And so we're working through the program similar to how they're done. So essentially you would show us, you still have to fill out some paperwork, show us that you are SNAP eligible, and then we would enroll you in the program. It would also still be through Charm Pass, so on the phone and be able to show it in that way.
Okay.
One question about the upgraded fare system. Is it the same company you're using? Is it giving you more flexibility to integrate with other agencies nearby that may have a electronic fare system?
So the fare system on the buses is a Gen fare
Gen
boxes. The back end piece is still cubic for us, and so that's the piece that we're gonna be looking to see what options we have in terms of the back end of that, and integrating with other with the lots is definitely a priority for us, so we wanna see what those options are, but we're still kind of working through what that looks like.
They're trying to sell the old retired fare boxes, maybe auction them off.
They're junk, but sure.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this because I was talking to Ken for a second, but how are we doing metrics? What sort of measurement or metrics are we gonna have regarding the new fare policy? Are you collecting data, and are we gonna be able to make any sort of like conclusions about the impact of the fares, about the new policy?
Yeah, I mean, so we have some estimates right now in terms of are people paying, are they not? So we're, being able to like, is the amount of fares that we're collecting increasing, right? So we've done some really targeted fare enforcement on the metro at different stations. And when the officer's there and doing it, we see a huge increase in terms of the amount of money that we're collecting and the amount of fare evasion that's not happening. So we are collecting metrics on that and setting some targets. We're also, I think one of the things is with the fare evasion more than anything else is that we need more people kind of enforcing that. And so that's one of the other things that we're working on.
Can you also, I'm just wondering, can we collect some anecdotal information from students and others who are benefiting from it? I mean, you do a great job, sort of in your social media and other things, sort of saying, letting riders speak in their own voice and so on. So to the extent that you could get some students saying, this is easier for me, I now get to use my student pass, et cetera, Are you doing stuff like that, or could you think about doing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we can
Demonstrate.
think about it. I think unfortunately, kind of during COVID, our policy was letting everyone on, and our policy has still been, if you see a kid, let them ride for free. So the effect for students is really minimal. What I'm actually trying to change is actually making it slightly more inconvenient, because right now they just walk on, and I really need them to show a badge or tap something, and so we're trying to kind of change that culture quite a bit.
Okay.
Just on the fare box again, will they be able to tap and go, like, just tap fare to pay, like you said you were talking about WMATA?
Yes, so our goal is to get there. The fare boxes, when they roll out this fall, are gonna be cash and flash, basically, so you can pay cash or the flash pass. We are working as quickly as we can to see what options we have to be able to install readers so that folks can either read, Apple Pay, credit card, or the actual Charm Pass app itself has the QR codes to be able to read those. So that is the goal. 2026 is probably our best case at this point.
Do you still have a large cash population
We do,
riding the bus?
we do.
About 40%? I know it was a large cash population in the past, but is that because we don't have multiple, and I don't know if you have multiple locations where they can go and buy the Charm Pass, but what do you think contributes to the large cash? Because most people are going to just the tap and go.
I mean, looking at the demographics of our riders, there's a lot of people who still like to use cash, prefer to use cash. There's certain neighborhoods where we see cash more than other things, right? For whatever reason, they may not want to use electronic payments that can be tracked. So we just want to make sure that that continues to be an option for our riders. Percentage-wise, it does continue to go down. We're seeing more people adopting the Charm Pass more than anything else. We see a lot of adoption there. But there's still a decent population who wants to use cash, and we want to make sure that we're making that available for them.
Thanks. Okay. So is our slides are working, Don, stable now, all good to go?
I got to the next
No,
one.
I just want to make sure we're okay, because we got a lot of slides coming up, so we're good.
Yes.
Also want to share, we did publish our customer experience action plan. And I did want to thank the BRTC Rider Experience Group. A lot of the feedback that we had received was incorporated into that customer experience plan. It's also based on the rider experience team and the interviews and that they've been out doing with our folks, more than 1,300 one-on-one rider conversations. It's really meant to be a near-term action plan, like what are we going to accomplish in the next year? We don't, the RTP is a great 25-year vision, but we want to be more short-term and actionable in what people are going to see. So the focus is improvements to service reliability, communication, especially communication during disruptions, accessibility, cleanliness, and safety system-wide. We are going to track our progress and we're going to update that on an annual basis based on kind of other best practices that we've seen throughout the industry. We also launched our Rules of the Ride campaign. So this is our rider code of conduct. It was launched in mid-August. Trying to be a little bit more clear with our riders about expectations for behavior on vehicles and at stations. We want to ensure that everyone has a safe, respectful, and clean transit environment, essentially. We did work really closely with our Youth Transit Council on this over the past year. They kind of took it up last fall. Worked throughout the year, different iterations, a lot of really positive feedback to help us make it simpler, make it easier to understand, make it easy to read. The graphics on our car cards that you see on the buses were developed by the Youth Transit Council, so we're really proud of the collaboration that we've done with them. And you will also see, if you check our Instagram, they were featured in our recent video, so very happy to continue partnering with them on that. We do also and will be implementing a ban policy by October 1st. So if you commit certain kind of prohibited acts, assault primarily, that we will have the ability to ban riders. And this is through legislation that was passed this past session. So I just want to thank the General Assembly for that. And we are also working towards an app to report security issues while riding. So you can more discreetly report something, right? So like right now, if you're seeing something, it may not be that you want to pick up your phone and obviously call the police, but you can on the app report something and it'll go directly into our police dispatch. So we're hoping again, both of those to be rolled out within the next month.
Can you, I mean, this is maybe a subjective question, but I don't have any basis from other systems. How is our conduct? How how far off the mark are we? I'm sure that every system has issues, every system has policies. I guess I'm just sort of wondering how you assess, where we are in terms of, what
I mean, when you look at metrics of the crime that we see, 99.9% of rides are uneventful, right? Like you get where you're going, you get home, things are not happening, like you are safe, secure. It's really more some of that kind of respectful type things that we're looking at, right? So like, did someone have their bag on the seat and you couldn't sit down? Was someone loudly listening to TikTok and you were subjected to that? And so those are some of the things we're just trying to make clearer to our riders that, that isn't acceptable. We don't want people doing that. But by and large, I mean, it is a safe system. I ride daily, I ride with my kids. I feel safe riding with my kids. And so, we are seeing that, but we do want to just make it clear to folks what is courteous behavior, what is prohibited behavior, and what is banned behavior on the system. And then we will enforce that.
I'm looking at the slides, what is the policy on audio played aloud, that's sort of TikTok, holding the phone, listening, et cetera? Because I don't, is it covered amongst these?
It is included in our courteous behavior that no, you're not allowed to play and use that.
I have a follow-up question about the ban policy. What's the appeal process on the ban policy?
So we're still developing all of that. It will go out by October 1st, but there will be an appeal policy for folks to, if they feel they were banned in error, to be able to appeal. There's a group who will evaluate that and determine whether to uphold it or to let it go.
An internal group?
Yes.
That will.
I mean, it sounds like a totally reasonable thing to do. It will be presumably not that easy to enforce because of all the things we've talked about in terms of what you're,
So we're leaning pretty heavily on other agencies that have done this. We're not the first. We're not breaking new ground here. Alexandria, Dash down there has done it. WMATA has done it. I'm trying to think if there's other agencies across the country that we've reached out to and got some of their feedback on how they've done it. MTA Police will have a dashboard where they're able to track this in a way that they haven't been previously. And we'll be sharing BOLOs, be on the lookout for our operators so that they can see and call police for assistance with enforcement.
Even Marcus gets banned, how would you keep him off of it? You know what I mean?
So we already use BOLOs, which is like a be on the lookout. You may see, like they pop up in the news sometimes. We post them internally as well. So Marcus, I don't know why we're using Marcus, but Marcus commits a crime on the bus. And it gets reported, there will be a picture of Marcus. And so if a operator sees Marcus on the bus, they could call MTA Police who could come out, confirm that yes, Marcus is banned, and then they would escort him from the bus. We're gonna be rolling it out. We're leaning on WMATA and some of the things that they've done. I'm not expecting it's gonna be perfect on day one, but we're gonna continue to work.
So the app that reports security issues, would that go then to the MTA police? Who would then decide what to do depending on the severity of the?
And so MTA Police, so go to their dispatch. MTA Police do have MOUs and partner with all of the local jurisdictions. So if something is happening in Baltimore County and our police are farther away, county police can and do, like they respond, they hold the scene until MTA Police are able to get there. So it's a great partnership. It works very well, and so that will continue.
For the record, Marcus has not been banned.
Sorry.
About this. I don't want that to be.
Sitting next to Marcus, Marcus is welcome on our buses, but I mean, that's essentially how. And so that's end of my slides. Happy to take any other questions on anything I didn't address.
Thanks. Questions, Maria? Okay, all right. Let's move on to the draft CTP presentation. Acting Secretary Biddle, I think you're gonna, let me just say very briefly at the beginning, no, please come on up. I'll be very brief, thank you. You're welcome. The commission has an important role to play in responding to and thinking about the CTP as it is rolled out, as I think you'll probably hear. This is the draft CTP. We went through this process last year. As you remember, last year's draft CTP caused some consternation. A lot of people weighed in, and a lot of changes were made and improvements were made in the final CTP by the time it was enacted. We are, I think everybody knows, especially those of you who are associated with local jurisdictions, There's a CTP tour, which is beginning really today. We've been added on as sort of the first stop before the only sort of non-jurisdictional stop, if you will, before the department goes to all of the jurisdictions. Many of you have participated in that, and I'm sure will continue to participate in that at your own jurisdictions. But this is the first stop. This is an opportunity to hear about this. The CTP was just released earlier this week. There is an extraordinary amount of information and data, although there is this really nice highlights brochure, which I think we're going to hear about. I encourage you to, obviously, any questions today, that's what the secretary and others are here to talk about, but dig in as much as you possibly can, share it with your colleagues. If you have colleagues in your transportation departments, if you have other folks in your organizations, and let's develop any additional questions or comments we might have, and we'll convey them, and I'm sure the department will be happy to get back to us as this process unfolds. But this is technically the kickoff of the state's Department CTP tour. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Acting Secretary Biddle, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone from the commission for having me here today. Happy to be in this seat representing the department at the commission today, and hope to join for as many meetings as possible going forward as my schedule allows. As the chair mentioned, we are about to kick off our annual Consolidated Transportation Plan tour. It will take us to every corner of our great state between September 15th and November 15th. I believe our first stop this year will be in Baltimore City, kicking things off, but our full schedule is available online, and certainly encourage any members of the commission or any members who are here today in the audience or attending online. We try to provide as much access to our meetings as possible, working closely with our local government partners to live stream those as well. And of course, any feedback that you have for us along the way, you can send it to me, to anyone on our team, plenty of our modal administrators. While this is the time of year when we talk most formally about our capital program, that feedback loop exists year round, and we are here to be the public servants delivering the important capital projects and operational services of all of the modes of the department year round, really. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you this morning and to really kick things off. Do want to just take one moment of personal privilege while on the record to echo the sentiments shared by the chair earlier in the meeting with the departure of Assistant Secretary Tony Bridges. He is someone who I've had the opportunity to work with in his role as a legislator, and then most recently, obviously, on our senior leadership team at the department. His energy, expertise, and ability to work with stakeholders is something that I think we all know is such a great gift and talent. I'm excited for him that he is going to continue to be part of the Moore Miller administration. His talents will certainly be well utilized going forward, and I'm sure that he will still take all of our phone calls and will stay close to all of the transportation issues that obviously have a nexus to the economic development portfolio that he'll be providing. But just want to thank him formally for his commitment to the administration of the department and also his role supporting this commission previously. So to dive right in to talk about the specifics of the capital program, which we just put out this past Tuesday. From a top line perspective, want to assure everyone that we are utilizing every dollar to make the best strategic investments to support the Moore Miller administration's transportation priorities. So the priorities are in specific order: enhancing safety, maintaining our system through careful and meaningful state of good repair efforts, and driving economic growth across the state. Our draft CTP is an exciting follow-up to a very productive legislative session this past year, and I want to thank our General Assembly partners, as well as our governor, obviously, for leading the charge on what was a very needed transportation investment. Looking around this room and seeing names online of folks who came to Annapolis to testify in support of the department. So I thank you all for taking the time to acknowledge that these were resources that were so deeply needed to deliver the projects and programs on which all of our residents rely. So through that leadership and the support of the General Assembly, we were able to secure roughly $400 million in additional transportation revenue annually. With those additional dollars, we're able to stretch them by leveraging and matching them with federal dollars to be about $700 million in annual transportation funding additional. And so because of this investment, I can share that the draft CTP includes transit investments in the Baltimore region and all across Maryland. To get into the details of the program, the balanced 6-year capital budget is approximately $21.5 billion. And that's an increase of nearly $300 million compared to last year's final CTP. The additional dollars are being used to take significant action to further maintain our system, keep it in working order, and ensure that Marylanders can get where they need to safely and reliably. Some of the highlights to flag are really the transit investments that I know Administrator Arnold will get into in more detail. But we want to get the Baltimore region back on track with that nearly $1.4 billion investment to modernize our 32-year-old light rail system. Replacing the entire fleet of Metro cars, which will be advancing soon, and installing new and modern signal system for our entire Metro line. We are matching additional federal formula dollars for transit. We are continuing funding and supporting the planning and technical activities associated with advancing the red line. And we are adding additional operator positions for MTA to meet the service demands of the Baltimore region. We are matching funds to support nearly $7 billion in Amtrak-led major Northeast Corridor, intercity and commuter rail enhancement projects, including the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, and advancing transit-oriented development at Reisterstown Plaza, Rogers Avenue, State Center, Cromwell, and Odenton, and investing in the maintenance needed to keep MTA's buses, trains, and stations in operation. So thanks to the increased revenues, according to MTA's 10-year capital needs inventory report, the agency will be able to address more than 90% of its state of good repair needs through 2030. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that. That is significant, and it is a much better place to be in and a much better statistic to be reporting to this group than we were reporting here last year. Last year when we were here talking about our draft CTT, we were unfortunately referring to an additional exhibit that looks at a list of deferrals. And so, we brought those deferrals back in through a restoration process that was in that final CTP last January, but that was all conditional upon the funding. So I just want to reemphasize that while the final CTP and the draft CTP do not look entirely different, the main difference is that that funding is real, and that is through the support and commitment of everyone involved in bringing those revenues forward through the legislative session.
Madam Secretary, can I ask you a question? Just in comparison, last year in the CTP, how much of the deferral amount did you fund? You're mentioning 90% this year. How much did you fund last year for comparison purposes?
Of state of good repair, how much was funded in terms of our state of good repair needs last year draft?
In comparison to the 90% that you're funding this year, what was the funding percentage last year?
I'll have to follow up on that specific percentage. I don't have that one with me right now, but I think what we knew is that we were for instance, last year we were not able to meet all of the required funding levels for state of good repair through TSIA, the Transit System, Transit Investment Act. So obviously less than 90%, but we can follow up with you on kind of that exact figure, because I think that's a worthwhile comparison kind of as we talk more statewide and with stakeholders on the advancements that we've made. But I do want to highlight that through these investments, we are meeting the compliance requirements with that bill, which was, wasn't where we were last year. And so we want to make sure that we're in compliance. We also want to make sure that we are putting out the projects that are addressing those critical state of good repair needs. So we can certainly follow up with you on that. Another flag to highlight, which is always of interest to all of our local government partners, is on the highway user revenue front. So the levels that we are funding through this program through fiscal year 27 are consistent with statutory requirements there. And we are also fully funding our locally operated transit system program. To talk a little bit about one of the first priorities that I mentioned on the safety front, what you'll be hearing more and more from the department as the weeks progress is an initiative we're calling Serious About Safety, where we're putting safety at the forefront of everything that we do across all modes and all projects and programs. And our draft program reflects this as a priority. The program includes $188 million for our Complete Streets program, which advances prioritized pedestrian safety action plan corridors, enhancing safety for vulnerable road users, those pedestrians and bicyclists, and builds off of our updated Complete Streets policy, which got some national recognition earlier this year as well, for our ability to look at complete streets, not just on our highway projects and highway system, but thinking about it across all of our modes because of the unique nature of our Department of Transportation. Specifically for this region, we include construction funding for Eastern Avenue in Baltimore County, Ritchie Highway in Anne Arundel County, and Route 1 in Howard County. While MDOT is aware of this commission's charge, is transit, there are also other multimodal investments that are enhancing safety, economic development, for Marylanders and across this region. To highlight a few of those, we're supporting the city of Baltimore in implementing key federal discretionary grants to address the Hanover Street Bridge, bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, and the West Baltimore United Project, also known as the Highway to Nowhere. We're advancing mobility and safety improvements on I-97 in partnership with Anne Arundel County. We're really excited about improvements coming to that highly trafficked corridor for anyone who's ever traveled from the Baltimore region to Annapolis. We'll be advancing that project through a partnership with County Executive Pittman, which we're really excited to celebrate in the coming weeks. We're also supporting state of good repair, safety, sustainability efforts at our port and at the Maryland Aviation Administration. This includes funding for a new air traffic control tower at Martin State Airport and replacing berth 11 at Dundalk Marine Terminal. We are furthering greenhouse gas reduction efforts at the Port of Baltimore and also funding to support the Sparrows Point Container Terminal project through a key partnership with Trade Point Atlantic. Obviously, cannot close out any remarks on transportation and MDOT without addressing our continued efforts to advance the Francis Scott Key Bridge rebuild to address congestion and freight conflicts in the region, which we know are ongoing for all residents and communities traveling throughout the Baltimore region. I will end my remarks there. Happy to answer any questions. I know Administrator Arnold will be talking more about MTA's specific capital program in more detail. But again, thank you so much. And cannot stress enough the excitement that we have for the program that's in front of us. We know that there will always be additional unmet needs. We know that there is always more that we will want to do. But the program in front of us today, I think, sets an important baseline for where we need to head for safety, state of good repair across the system. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Acting Secretary. One narrow question for you, and then I want to say something and see if other folks have questions for you that are not necessarily MTA specific.
Sure.
Can you or someone just remind us, when is the HUR cliff, as people like to call it? I just forget what year that is. Is it 28?
Correct. Yeah, so it would go from the 20% percentage shared back down to, I believe, 15.6%.
I know that there's a lot of discussion about, was there a bill, an HUR bill last session, or was it just, I just don't remember. A lot of talk about, the TSIA extension, HUR extension, all these things to make sure. And I know, although it's not specifically a transit item, the HUR is cause for enormous concern. And I hope that in this session, and I expect in this session, there'll be an effort to extend the HUR funding before we reach the cliff.
Right, and it's certainly funding that all local jurisdictions, both at the county and municipal level, will rely upon for delivery of transportation projects within the jurisdiction. And while it is called highway user revenues, I don't think there's any provision that prohibits folks from using it for, a transit purpose or a non, as long as it's within transportation. So, that is one that is, we are closely tracking and we understand its importance to local governments.
So my broader comment, I just wanted to say, and we'll see the MTA numbers. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to at least take a look at some of it, but we're here today to look at them together. We are in a very, very different place than we were a year ago. It really was a state of good repair crisis a year ago. And I think thanks to the governor, the secretary, the acting secretary, and she was the deputy in the legislature, and advocacy from a whole host of people. And as Secretary said, people who are represented in the room or online, we really are in a very, very different place. I mean, I think we need to understand probably more specifically how the new money is being deployed and so on. But having looked at it and gotten a little bit of a preview, it's evident that there is now a real solution to the immediate existing state of good repair needs. There is, and maybe we'll get to this as well, there is, after the current CTP, sort of a concern about what we'll do, because the capital needs will go up. And I think when the administrator gave us the capital needs inventory presentation at the prior meeting, we saw that the capital needs go on for the ensuing next 6 years. And then there's a bit of a spike, and it relates to just the way the system's assets, if I have this correctly, are sort of going to require capital investment. So there is definitely a concern about what happens after the current CTP, and we'll have to keep our eye on that. And there is for sure a concern about the systems, our ability to expand service, to enhance service, all of the many, many things that we all want to do. Which, and I know that the governor, I know the legislative legislators, I know the department is very focused on how we can continue to expand the system in all sorts of ways. But as we said last year to each other, there is a need to stabilize the existing system. There is the need to create a solid baseline and platform for that next chapter. And I really am very, very pleased to see that obviously the money was made available and that the money is now being deployed. And it is extraordinary to say that we're going to be able to fund 90% of those capital needs during the CTP. So I want to thank you and congratulate you on that work. The devil will be in the details, of course, but the top line here is really, really significant. And I think it should be noted, and appropriate thanks and credit should be given to the people who worked so hard to turn the, I don't know what mode I should say, the ship around, the bus around, in terms of where we are. So we'll get into the details, lots of details today and going forward. But I think it's important to appreciate how far we've come with the leadership of so many people and the engagement of so many people. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think, certainly the dollars on the page are significant, and they're something that we celebrate, and that it's something that is a motivating factor for our leadership and our teams, and really the broader transportation industry at large. But I also want to note that, the work, you said the devil's in the details. Programming the money is step one, but getting those projects, out on the street, getting them to be at the point of implementation is completion is really where the next, challenge will lie. And I want to acknowledge the work of Administrator Arnold and her team, that even when we were in a period of fiscal constraint from being able to fund additional capital projects, there was a lot of work happening behind the scenes to ensure that that pipeline was maintained and that we were making strategic do whatever we could to further our procurement process and pipeline, so that when the funds were available, we had the more, infrastructure ready to move these projects through. And so I know that she'll be talking about that more in detail in her presentation, but I wanted to acknowledge some of the work that goes unseen. It was very much necessary for us to be able to hit the ground running with this program now that it is.
I'm sure I think this is contained in the presentation, but so I'll put a pin in it, but I think the amount of capital, and I forget the exact way it's said, but the percentage of capital dollars that we've been able to spend has dramatically increased.
Yes, I will let her
I'll let
share that.
her talk about that. It's a little bit of a preview because there was a concern about whether we were spending the money that we had. I think significant improvements have been made there, which we.
Yes.
So are there other questions from the commission for the secretary, who will be here presumably, but while she is up at the podium, questions? Okay, well, we're not off the hook,
I will be here.
but you certainly can yield to the administrator.
I will yield to the administrator, and again, thank you all.
Thank you.
And I will echo the thanks to all the advocacy and support from this group. Asked you to show up on our bus hearing in the spring. You all came. You all came, of course. And I think that went a really long way to speaking to the importance of transit and transportation in the region. And so I just want to say thank you to this group for advocating on this budget. My first slide here is really just the MDOT overview, which is very covered, so I'm not going to go through this. But overall, it's a $21.5 billion draft. It's stable. It allows us to really kind of focus on delivering, and that's where MTA is focused. Specifically on the MTA side, our light rail modernization program is fully funded. The light rail modernization program is fully funded. This has been a concern for a while. Our 32-year-old system really hasn't seen major investments since we did double tracking. This is a major shot in the arm for that system to really improve it to the level that we need. So we're really excited about that. It is moving. We are on track to advertise for some of those projects later this month, and we're continuing to move forward with The Purple Line and Amtrak Northeast Corridor commitments are fully funded, so our partnership with Amtrak on the BMP tunnel, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel here in Baltimore, as well as the Susquehanna River Bridge just north of here are fully funded. Planning for the Red Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit are funded. MTA operational needs are fully funded, while other major transit agencies are facing fiscal cliffs. I don't know if you guys get the daily transit emails that I do, but SEPTA, just up the road, is dealing with major issues. Muni in San Francisco made some cuts and is looking at another like 5 to 7% cut across the board. Pittsburgh is struggling. Like I could just keep going and naming some of the fiscal cliffs that other agencies are seeing while we are fully funded on the operational side. So it's a really good place for us to be in a positive spot. We're advancing our major state of good repair projects. The Metro rail car replacement is nearing completion. Elevator and escalator rehab is funded and is ongoing. And we're getting our regular bus and mobility replacements on an annual basis. In the CTP in the first 4 years, 90% of our state of good repair needs are met. As state of good repair, maintaining what we have and getting back on track does remain a priority. Diving in a little bit deeper, and we've tried to kind of separate this into Baltimore and statewide, to respond to this group. So you can see overall here, it's relatively stable relative to the last final CTP. I think as the secretary said, everything that was in the final is now actually funded, so that's kind of where we're at. We are seeing a slight increase in the Baltimore service compared to the final. And a lot of our annual fluctuations really just reflect project completions, cash flows and startup. So for example, you might look at this and say, oh no, Metro went down by whatever the math is on that 66 million. The reality is that we are finishing a $500 million project and the cash flows that are associated with that are being spent. It's a spike, right? Like that's how capital projects work, is you have a big spike, it goes down, it goes back up again. And so essentially on the Metro side, that spike has kind of normalized out. We still have major investments happening in platforms and elevators and escalators and electrical systems. So the needs are being met, just the spike really isn't there. Where you are going to be seeing the spike right now is on the light rail side because of the major investment in that system. And again, that's fairly normal for what we're seeing across the system. And you can see the breakdown here by mode. And then beyond that, our MARC system did see some increases mostly associated with the Northeast Corridor projects, which again are kind of those spikes that we see in capital projects. Diving in a little deeper, again here, so some of the key projects that we're working on, agency-wide, elevator, escalator, IT, and multimodal projects are continuing. We're buying buses every year, we're overhauling buses. The light rail program is really the modernization. On the Metro side, again, I highlighted the completion of that project, and then you can see some of the other details that we're seeing throughout the program here. Just a short kind of history of where we've been. And again, you can see that major plus up that we saw in the final CTP that continues into the draft. We went from, the 4.8 billion up to 5.7. It is a little lower, mostly just because projects, again, completing, because that's how the cycle works. But we're, still 90% funded for state of good repair and continuing those major commitments that we've made on the capital side. As the secretary mentioned and the chair mentioned, MTA has really been focused on improving our budget performance. I think it's been mentioned, people say, well, MTA doesn't spend their money. We are trying to change that narrative and MTA is spending our money. So in FY25, we expended 97% of our final CTP budget. So basically the money that we had, we did actually spend. It went into projects that are improving our state of good repair across the system. It's a 24% increase over the prior fiscal year. And this specifically in the state of good repair and enhancements, it was an increase of 90 million over the prior fiscal year. And our project delivery pipeline is continuing to grow to meet the SDR needs of the system. We've set up some additional folks in procurement and additional pipelines, and we're changing how we're doing things there. So we're ready to continue to meet the ongoing needs that we're seeing across the system. And you can see the expenditures by year there. So again, FY25 is the most that MTA had ever spent on state of good repair in the history of the agency. So we are continuing to expand and deliver on those promises. In the draft CTP, FY31 helps us to continue the ongoing state of good repair efforts. So the light rail modernization program, elevator and escalator, and vehicle replacements are the big things that are coming into the program in FY31. And we have just shy of 20 million that are allocated to new projects for some of our core modes, which are outlined here in this chart. Aligning to the capital needs and the inventory that we publish, again, you can see in those early years, 90% of the needs are met. In FY31, it's about 60%. I will say it's fairly typical to see higher numbers in the earlier years of the program and lower in the outer years. So this is not something that we haven't seen before. And again, we're able to continue all the projects that we're working towards. And we'll be keeping an eye to ensure that the funding is there, but at this point, not sounding any alarms or anything. Moving on to the operating side, our FY26 operating budget is 1.3 billion. You can see the breakdown here. Our bus operations does continue to be the majority of our operating budget of 681 million. Rail is next, which is the 337. Statewide programs, including our lots programs, are in that 135, and then the administration is 153. As always, our operations budget is driven primarily by contracts and by people, right? So salaries and benefits that we're paying to make sure that we have the folks available to operate the buses, operate the trains. Our budget history on the operating side, again, you can see continued increases and investment in the operating budget, which does reflect the commitment from MDOT and from the Moore administration to ensure that we have the funding to meet those needs and are continuing to meet the needs. So FY26 is just a little above FY25, so we'll be continuing kind of on the progress that we've seen there. So going forward, again, we're prioritizing maintaining what we have with the available resources. We're going to continue our capacity building. We've made a lot of good progress. We're not going to let that slide, and we're going to make sure that we're continuing to make sure that we're able to spend all of our allocated funding and advancing our safety critical work, including the light rail modernization program. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Well, commissioners, questions either of the administrator regarding the MTA presentation or more broadly about the CTP for the acting secretary? Questions? Yes, Lee?
So I will too echo the state of good repair, both the allocation, the spend of 97%, and that it's the highest MTA has implemented in its history is incredibly impressive, so congratulations there. I think that there's a lot of good news here, and I don't wanna then sound negative, but I think that, our role as a commission is also to continue to advocate. So I think the two outstanding questions as this moves around the state and then goes to the legislature is the ability on the capital side from a procurement standpoint for those things to continue to effectively be implemented. It's, from an economic standpoint, we're dealing with the tariffs, you've got such lag times because, right, the ones you have listed as priority, you've got vehicles, all of those pieces have a real intersection on the procurement side. So I think that continues to be perhaps, a bottleneck that we as a commission have to think about and consider. And then I think the other comment I would make is there's no doubt that state of good repair has to be first and foremost for us to be effective for service to exist. But I will say that, what I hear consistently, right, is the desire to improve service in terms of frequency and coverage, which means expansion. So I just don't want to lose sight that us as commissioners need to be thinking about, let's not, overstep, and celebrate that this is huge progress. But I think that at the end of the day, the public is looking for that expansion, that improvement of service. This is the first necessary step to get there. So congratulations on that. But I do want to just say we've got to continue to advocate on those other fronts.
Thank you. Others? Really?
I'll take it.
I'm curious, and this does not have to be today at all, but one thing that maybe this is more for an MDOT question. I'm just trying to understand sort of how the new revenues. We all saw the new revenues from the last session. We saw the estimates. They were just estimates. I forget if those estimates are MDOT estimates or DLS estimates,
One
whether
thing you
the,
saw were probably DLS
Yeah.
estimates, we've done our own, they track kind of, you know,
Yeah.
within the same range, but I don't wanna get ahead of your
yeah,
question.
thanks. No, I mean, I think it'd be interesting and useful for us to hear, and this would be done in follow-up for sure, sort of how those new revenues, and you're estimating them because they don't exist yet, are sort of being spread through the CTP, you know, just a sense of where they're going and for what purposes. Because I think, you know, there was a list of revenues, a list of potential uses, et cetera. So it would be helpful if we could get some information on that just for context. The other sort of broader question I would ask is if we could get some information just to understand, and you've given us a broad NDOT presentation, you've obviously given us an MTA presentation, which makes complete sense. It'd be useful to get some idea of the other modes and how the other modes are faring in all of this. It's not a competition between MTA and the other modes. It's just that we are responsible for MTA and not directly for the other modes. And it would be useful to understand sort of how the different modes are faring in the CTP. It is certainly my hope that they are being, you know, that they're being increased, that the revenues are helping them as well. But I just think as transportation and transit advocates, it would be useful for the commission to just get a feel for the modes. And I know that's in there. I mean, everything is in there, except that it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. So if you could help sort of boil down for us a little bit, what the, you know, in a way, what the sort of PowerPoint or at least summary would be for others, just so we have a sense of how the different, does that make sense?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I think those are two sort of good follow-up questions. I
I can
think,
give a little bit of like a.
yeah, sure, if you
preliminary
can,
response
please,
too,
go ahead.
Sure. So, you know, on the revenues, right, thank you for acknowledging that they were projections. And it is going to take a couple of quarters on the new revenues to see where they're coming in. In addition, we have to track to see where our, you know, pre-existing revenues are tracking. We track, you know, from motor fuel tax, titling tax, all of those other factors that come into the TTF. You know, we track each of them and kind of manage the risk associated with them with the other sort of, you know, statewide, national, global market factors. And the Board of Revenue Estimates will convene later this fall, and that'll be kind of a good marker for us as we are both taking the, you know, feedback from stakeholders on this draft plan and then also understanding are all of our revenue projections tracking where we thought they were going to be as we put together that final plan that will then come out in January. So we can certainly keep this body abreast of, you know, how those revenues are tracking. I am equally curious and you know, hopefully they track above, right? Because that means that we'll be able to do even more with them, but certainly a lot of assumptions went into those. To your question about where, you know, kind of the delta of additional revenues goes as it spreads out, it'll be hard to track, you know, dollar for dollar, this dollar went to the, you know, this project, that project, et cetera, just because of the nature of all of the money and how it comes into the TTF. But, you know, from a generalization, the concept that was based upon, you know, the goal of the 400, from getting the 400 to the 700 was largely to get to those federal formula dollars. And those formula dollars primarily support the highway and the transit side of things. So I think that we can just talk a little bit more, maybe with more specificity, both at the upcoming tour meetings and also in maybe a follow-up presentation here on some of the additional, you know, specific targeted investments, getting into a little bit more detail, whether through a presentation or through, you know, some sort of, you know, handout or list that we could share with this group. And then, you know, to your question about kind of how things split across the modes, a little friendly competition never hurts. But looking at the capital breakdown, I believe for this program, MTA receives approximately 30% of all funding on the capital side, about 5.7 billion. When you look at transit altogether in terms of share of the pie with the investment that does go to the Ramada system as well, we're at about 47% for all capital funding towards transit. And then when you look at the state highway allocation, which is the next highest, would be about 35.9%. I think there are some tables both, I'm not sure if they're in the highlights document, but they are certainly in the full CTP document. So we do try to make sort of that, share of the pie, something that is kind of accessible when in a very large document altogether. The other piece of the pie is also on the highway side, the highway user revenue and how that gets factored into those percentages as well. So can talk more in the future about those breakdowns of share of capital funding, but I think that, the flip side of the coin is then also kind of the operating side. And I believe, our transit operating is where we have the largest pie shares for that, but keeping in mind of all of the modes and what we're doing, understanding the charge of this commission is on the transit fund, but any questions that, on other modes, because I think the intersection of modes is kind of the unique part of our agency, which can be challenging at times, but also provides for, more opportunities as well.
Yeah, we love all the modes, but we are expected to love this one best.
Yes. It was when you swore to love that they know, and
Yeah.
truly appreciate the support and advocacy from everyone.
A couple quick follow-ups to that, just based on something you said. I mean, one of the potential sort of pie chart versions of the revenues, we're just understanding sort of how those revenues are going. Obviously not project by project, that would be impossible, but like sort of, capital operating debt, it's kind of the major food groups of where the money's going, just would be helpful to have an overview. Again, you can certainly follow up. You mentioned, I mean, we've all become familiar with the 400 million leverages 700, leverages 700 million total expansion because of the federal leveraging. What can you tell us by way of update about the sort of federal environment and whether that ratio and formula still holds true in view of, changes in the federal administration?
Yeah, ratio and formula still holds true, right? For formula dollars, we are still looking at, the 80-20 split that we've worked through in the past. There are some projects on the state highway front where they are able to look at, a 90-10 or through the use of toll credits, leverage even further to stretch those dollars. So that is all, I think in a really stable posture. Obviously, at the national level, we're looking at the reauthorization of, the federal transportation bill coming up next federal fiscal year. And so, conversations about that reauthorization process are happening across the country with my peers in all other states. And so we are looking to, make sure that funding is held, at those levels where they were already set, because I think we know that is the level that states rely on for the formula funding purposes. Where we did see some potential uncertainty earlier in the year was in terms of some of the federal discretionary dollars and being able to navigate a little bit of a tumultuous landscape in terms of advancing some of those grant agreements, given some feedback that we received from the federal government earlier in the year through close coordination with our federal partners and also the support of a coalition of other states who had similar concerns about the advancement of some of these key discretionary grants and the terms upon which we were at one point being asked to consider. We've worked through a point where we were comfortable and able to execute additional funding agreements for those discretionary grant programs. One of them is the next year of fiscal year funding for the light rail vehicle grant that was received. So that was a really essential milestone for us to move forward with. And it did involve, some legal action that was taken, by our state and other coalition states. So, in short, we are in a much more stable position than we were about 6 months ago. But that federal landscape does continue to evolve and change. And so we have a strong congressional delegation who is also advocating for us in Washington. We'll continue to work closely to make sure that we don't lose any of the progress of the hard work that we did on the state side, but we are feeling secure and confident in those funds.
Thank you, that's really helpful to hear. Okay, again, another round. Any questions for the secretary or the administrator?
I have non-transit questions, since you're here. I'll make them quick.
We want her to come
We're
back.
talking about other modes, so this will be, one is yay on the Howard Street Tunnel. I just wanna say congratulations, it's on track, on time, and that is a huge improvement from a, economic impact from the port standpoint. The second is just Key Bridge, you mentioned it kind of in your comments when you started. Is it still slated that sometime this fall, we'll kind of hear the updated estimate in terms of total cost? I mean, that's my general understanding.
I think we need to see where we get through the design process, right? Our target has always been getting to that 70% threshold, because that's the point at we'll have a lot more certainty both on cost and schedule. And certainly the unique nature of working through the progressive design build process with our contractor. We want to be really careful and cautious as we move forward. I can assure everyone that we are making tremendous progress on the design front and can't thank enough the work of the team at the Transportation Authority, our local Federal Highway Division office, who is literally have folks embedded with us, making sure that all cycles of review are advancing extremely quickly, and all of the private sector contractor teams who are involved as well. So that is still our goal, is kind of advancing design before and coming forward with additional updates there. But the progress that we've seen both in the field and behind the scenes is really tremendous, and just want to thank everyone who's involved, but can certainly keep that as one, knowing the regional significance of that project that this body stays briefed upon.
Right. And then the last question ties back to transit. Is there an increase in allocation around the transit-oriented development funding that kind of got moved forward last year? I know that was implemented. Is that going to continue in this budget? And if so, is
Yeah,
an increase
so-
kind of stable?
So the fund, I believe, is held at $5 million level, and so I think what the advancements what we're making is where we're finding the opportunities to make those investments, where we have partners who are coming and want to be a part of that. So a lot of traction there with that fund, and then also with the efforts of our team and working with local governments. We had really exciting advancements both with Odenton recently and Bowie State just a few weeks ago. So transit-oriented development is kind of that the exciting nexus between the modes that we get to be part of as well. So thank you very much there.
Alan, can you give an update on commuter bus service? Have we increased our commuter bus service, or has it decreased, or what's the plans for commuter bus service?
So commuter bus, if you will remember, it was last summer, we made some adjustments to commuter bus service to kind of more align it with the ridership levels. We have remained stable since then, and ridership is continuing to increase. We're closely monitoring that. We are seeing, I would say, especially in Southern Maryland, some large increases, and we're looking to see if we need to add additional service in that area, but it is overall stable compared to where it was last year.
Yeah, I wanna echo what like he said, in terms of if we're not looking to necessarily expand the system, but maintain the system, it may be beneficial for us to start to look at programs with the local entities to see how we can make more connectivity and expand the commuter bus service, because it's about getting people to jobs as well, right? So as the Baltimore region is growing with jobs and economic development, at some point, we gotta look at how we do things a little bit different besides just the red line, and be a little bit more creative about that as well, because when you're on 695 and you're sitting in traffic, people are frustrated with that, so we gotta have other options, other more express type options, and maybe commuter bus service, if we can't increase the regular lines, maybe we can increase the commuter bus service to get people back and forth.
Yeah, and
to
the
jobs.
Be More Bus program plan does include some commuter bus options and some basically regional bus options. We're looking at, some specifically, one of the ones that we've heard is that White Marsh to Trade Point Atlantic is a need, and so it's definitely something that we're looking at and looking to see where those options are.
Other questions? Tony?
As we look at the capital needs alignment in the further years out towards 2030, 2031, when you tour this to other parts of the state, how will you be explaining that gap in unfunded?
I think largely what I shared with you guys today, it is pretty typical to see, the kind of arc of the budget where it goes up and then goes back down a little bit as we further identify the needs. 6 years out, we know what the needs are, we have good planning of those things, but it does come into focus a little bit more as we get closer to that.
Madam Secretary, I want to just make one comment about TOD. We're not, this commission is, TOD is transit, and it's also economic development, and it's a lot of different things. First of all, and it's nice to have you here because it allows me to say that the resuscitation of the TOD program at MDOT is welcome, and it's been very effective. You have a great team, Joe McAndrew and then David Zayden, who's been leading it. Really very, very optimistic about opportunities for TOD we did a lot of TOD work, several administrations ago. I think not much was done in the prior administration, regrettably, and you've done a really good job, and the governor has done a good job of resuscitating it. But I would just encourage you to accelerate that as much as you can. It is one of those sort of multiplier effect things where you can invest and it has all sorts of other impacts. I also know, I'm also a city representative, and I also know that the city is very focused on enhancing its partnership with the state, and there's I think a regular working group, not just the city and the state, but other jurisdictions. So it's extremely fertile territory, which has been really, really underappreciated, underfunded. And I think everybody recognizes that while the law is moving in the right direction, and there's funding in modest amounts for the TOD planning grants, it's not enough to really make leaps forward. So I would just ask you and encourage you, particularly as you go into the next year, the next session, to find ways, because it's really a win-win to invest in TOD opportunities around the state. So I just mentioned it because I think you mentioned it, and I want to be clear.
No, and thank you for acknowledging the work of the team, and I have to, also acknowledge the work of, my predecessor, Secretary Wiedefeld. One of the things that he came in on, very early on was just seeing kind of that untapped opportunity in the world of TOD along the Baltimore system. In his time running DC Metro, I think that the joint development program there really blossomed and grew in a way that, we saw investment coming into stations where absent the vision, it would not have ever come together the way that it was. And if you've traveled along some of the more recent developments along that network, you can really kind of see, the fruits of that labor. And so to your point about, needing to accelerate, I agree. And I think we have some really strong markers of the potential for acceleration just in the level of interest that we've seen in some of the more recent, RFPs that we have, the responses that we're getting, the quality of the responses, competitiveness, and seeing that we have more and more entities who want to be involved in these versus, maybe seeing more limited interest just a few years ago. So the interest is there, the market is there, and we're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I just know a little bit about this, but I'll tell you, I think in part that's because the private sector sees a more prepared and interested partner in your MDOT than it did. So it's good, it's all good.
Yeah.
But we've gotta
Take
dig in and take advantage and accelerate. So, okay, I just want to say one thing to folks who are here. This is the beginning of this process. It's going to go on for a bit of time with all the tours. Some of you may appear, even speak at the tours in your various jurisdictions. I think city one starts next week, or 15th, I think, is the first one for the regular cycle of jurisdictions. We want to hear from interested parties about your questions and concerns about the CTP. The commission is here to serve everybody. We don't really have a format that allows people to stand up here and engage with the director and the administrator and the secretary, but we want to be a conduit for that. So I would just encourage everybody who is listening, if you have specific questions, I know you'll address them, especially those of you who are really thinking about this, we'll address them directly to the department and the administration. I know that you'll probably appear at other tour stops, et cetera, but we are very interested in hearing. So I would encourage you to, if there's anything you want to highlight for us to evaluate, to assess. We have professional staff who are very capable of this here at BMC, Don and others. So we want your comments, thoughts, suggestions, and constructive criticisms. Whatever it is that you have, we'd like to hear it because we're going to be part of this conversation as it unfolds between the time of the draft CTP and the fund. So it's an open invitation. I regret that we can't sort of do, it's not intended to be a public forum. It just doesn't work that way in terms of the agenda, but I don't want you to feel like we're not interested in what other people might have to say. So please let us know. You can easily reach Don at BMC, or I'm sure that folks can find us. You were waving at me?
There in the package, there is a schedule of the tour meetings.
Right. Yeah, and it's available on the MDOT website. There's a whole CTP page put ink in your printer if you're gonna, it's a lot. But but I don't remember if you did a highlights brochure like this last year.
I don't know if we did one exactly like that last year. We've done them, you know, in the past. But I think, you know, certainly this year there's more to highlight.
Yeah.
Last year it was that black and white deferral list, so we're
Right.
really
So,
excited to
but
have the
this-
highlights.
Yeah, but this is a good, I mean, it's obviously fairly high level, but it's useful, and then you can dig, depending on your interest, time, technical expertise, et cetera, you can dig really as deep as you want. So I encourage you to poke around there and see what you think. Okay,
Let me just update the
Yeah.
schedule for CTP. It had Baltimore County TBD, but it's located at Towson University.
I mean the location.
The location, yes.
And I had a quick question for you, Secretary. Do you have a sense of who attends the tours and maybe better yet, who doesn't attend the tours that you would like to reach?
Yeah, so I think it varies by jurisdiction. Different jurisdictions will have the county government perhaps as the host, and then others, the local delegation will be the host. And so I think we have some jurisdictions where we have representation from most council districts as well as from most members of the delegation, sometimes multiple members of county delegation. Other counties have structured their meetings where there is a public comment period of that. We kind of defer to the locals on kind of how they want their meetings to be set up. Some will be individual citizens will have the opportunity to speak. Other times, some special interest or advocacy groups will come up and speak on behalf of their special interests. So, really, we work with the locals to structure the feedback as much as possible. But know that even if the formal meeting itself does not always have a public comment period to it, we tend to bring a lot of staff who are eager to have conversations with anybody before or after the meetings to make sure that we're really capturing all of that feedback. And then the process of following up on questions and issues, large or small, is something that we take real pride in as well, because the feedback and the constructive criticism, these are all things that are important to us, even if it is, a tree trimming issue that could impact, visibility and signage in an area, or, an idea for an unfunded major corridor project. All of these things are important parts to kind of how the process works. So I encourage as many people to come out who are able to. As I mentioned earlier, there is the virtual way to tune in if you're not able to attend in person. This will be my 12th year doing CTP tours, and while it can be a very busy time of year, I think it's really impactful for all of us in the department. So thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. So we'll move on to our other major item, which is the CMRTP update. And who is handling that for MTA? Albert? I'll just say one thing at the outset about process. Albert may say this, but under the statute, the commission is required to approve this before it is final. As you'll recall, and I'll say it for folks who haven't been following necessarily, we convened a subgroup of the commission to engage with the staff, and there's been several meetings on the subject. And I think, I've been participating in all of those meetings. Not to jump the gun, but I think this is a good outcome. I think it is something that we should stand behind, and I think that you should assume that we're recommending that the commission adopt it. That said, I don't think it's fair for the commission to receive, although there have been, 3 or 4 presentations of the commission, so it's not been entirely the smaller group. But because it's now a tighter document, it's a more fuller document, and it answers a lot of questions that the commission and the work group asked. We circulated this to you, I think, yesterday or the day before. You're gonna get a presentation today. MTA itself is required by October the 1st to finalize and deliver under the law, the plan. We're obviously not meeting until 2 months. So what we're going to do is we'll take all of your questions and comments today. We'll also give you afterwards a period of, 2 weeks, whatever it is, we'll figure out the time to provide any additional comments or questions you might have for us to incorporate. And then we will ask the commission by email to vote to approve the plan. So if there's a formal approval, we may ratify that at the next meeting, but I think it'll be fine to do it that way. And that's the process we're gonna follow. So I want you to use today to ask any questions, but you'll also have a chance afterwards, with the added benefit of this presentation, to take a hard look, go through it, however you want to, and then submit questions to Dawn, and we'll figure out how to organize that. And what I'm gonna ask is ultimately to allow me and the vice chair to sort of work with MTA to finalize a document to make sure, because there's still editing and formatting and tidiness and all that kind of stuff. So that's the context. And with that, Albert, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Thanks to everybody for having me back today. And I want to say we greatly appreciate all of the work that all of you, the work group members especially, have done to help this plan reach its current form. It's a lot of work, it's been a lot of work. We got a lot of detailed comments, very thoughtful and insightful comments that have made this a better plan. And so I, personally and on behalf of MTA, want to thank you. Then if you didn't get a copy of the plan for whatever reason, ask John or ask me, and you'll be able to get it to you.
Yeah, Dawn sent it out.
Okay, great.
Correct, Dawn? I just can't remember because I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay,
You should have.
so just our goals for today, want to just do a brief look back, review BRTC's involvement in the development process of this RTP update plan, summarize key points that are in the update, talk about any final questions or comments that you have now. Obviously, you'll have time after this before the email vote to do that. And I understand we're probably not going to get to a vote to adopt or approve today, but I think that's the goal for between now and October 1st. So just to look back a little bit, we've been working since the winter to go back and talk about how have we done on progress since the previous RTP? What's the transit market demand look like today? Back into the spring, we worked on developing what new corridors or corridor segments could look like, thinking about what modes might be suitable along those corridors. And then over the summer, worked on what does that look like actually in terms of a plan to produce and develop those corridors in short, medium, and long. As we'll talk about, we sort of moved on from early, mid, and long-term opportunity phrasing, talked about how we're balancing growth and existing system modernization, as we've been talking about this morning. And that's sort of when we've done the meat of this development of the document. So today we have for you a final, hopefully document, relatively final. What we're going to do, we have what's now a Word document, sort of gently formatted document. Once the content is final, we'll take it and we'll format it to make it look graphically pretty and sort of stylized like the previous RTP. That'll all be sort of the style. The content is not going to change from what you approve, except unless there's any kind of typographical errors that somebody brings to our attention. Just a brief refresher on the questions that we've asked you all, and I'm not going to read them all, but I want to show them just to remind us that your feedback over the course of this plan really has gone into this plan. It's made it better, and we've found the things that you've brought to our attention and made us think about have really guided this plan and directed it to the place where it is now. And appreciate that. And hopefully you found the questions that we asked thought-provoking enough. And feedback on process is always helpful. And so as we wrap up, if you have process feedback questions as we work on other plans or things that we want to work on with you, appreciate that as part of this plan. So with all that being said, at a high level, what's in the update? So just to start, what is the RTP supposed to do? It's supposed to lay out a 25-year vision for public transportation in the Central Maryland region, identify ways to improve existing MTA transit, better coordinate transit region-wide and across providers, show the places and corridors that would most benefit from new infrastructure investments, and then provide an opportunity to coordinate transit planning with local land use and other statewide transportation planning efforts. And I think it's that last one that we maybe have deviated the most from the previous plan, sort of the corridor piece, and sort of the focusing on the land use interactions. And so want to focus most on the corridors, but just overall, in terms of table of contents, we have a lot of the same stuff that we talked about over the course of the plan. So we have progress since the previous RTP. We talked about transit market demand in the region. And then we have updated corridor recommendations are sort of the chapter 4. Chapter 5 are updated strategy recommendations. Chapter 6 are updates to transit network improvement areas. And chapter 7 is the 5-year implementation plan. So what's changed? This is the big stuff. There's a lot of detailed stuff too. But first and foremost, the inclusion of BRTC as a partner in developing and improving the RTP update is new. It's a shift from the previous plan, which was developed by a standalone commission. So that's new. We've adjusted the expected travel trends that were the basis for our analysis. That's post-COVID transit market and demand data. Some things have changed, maybe not as much as changed in the aggregate as you might have thought, but there were changes that do matter in the way we think about transportation planning. Then we went from that sort of updated understanding of travel trends, and we got a lot more focused on the high priority corridor investments, and then worked on sort of policy recommendations for other settings. So that greater focus is a shift from the previous RTP. We revised RTP strategies to make sure they're both relevant and useful. And then on the transit network improvement area side, we've inventoried actions by MTA, other agencies, which sort of advance those improvements that were identified, the local improvements that were identified in the 2020 RTP. And we've identified some new actions for the next 5 years. So corridor recommendations is the meat, so I'll start there. We've moved away from that early, mid, and long-term opportunity corridor designations that were in the previous RTP and tried to be more specific. So to do that, we've organized the 30 corridors that were in the previous RTP into 4 tiers based on what we would call their investment readiness. Those are defined by quantitative characteristics and sort of qualitative input and assessment. Each tier has a different approach to most effectively advance transit in the region, in that portion of the region. And then we provided the most detailed recommendations for corridors in the most investment ready tier, which is investment in transit service and infrastructure. This flow chart, I think you've seen it before, but it provides an overview of sort of the questions that we asked to put the corridors into buckets. And that's, does a corridor currently have high capacity, high quality transit? Basically, that's existing light rail and metro. If it does, that falls into this tier that's maintained transit performance. If not, if it's one of the corridors where we would like to see investment, the question is, do the corridor's current characteristics show strong potential for maximizing additional investment? Basically, where would we see good return on investment in terms of ridership and other benefits if we make an investment now or in the next horizon year of this plan, 20 years or 25 years. That if that's true, then that falls in that tier of invest in transit service and infrastructure, the green box. That's where we have the most developed recommendations. If it's not, if it's maybe not quite ripe yet, question we ask is, do local land use planning or strong stakeholder advocacy support transit ready policy and planning changes? If yes, basically, does the local planning say this is an area where we would, the local government would like to see additional density, like to see sort of the investments in connecting infrastructure and access to transit, then those corridor segments have gone into that purple box, implement supportive policy and planning. And if no, if this is an area that the locals have said, we really envision this in the long term, maybe you'll see growth in population or employment, but it's going to be a low density area. We don't really see the type of growth there that's the most compatible with transit investment. Then that falls into a box that we're calling developed transit coverage opportunities. And one shift I just want to note from the previous RTP is that we've done some resegmenting and combining so that we don't have any duplicate segments. previous RTP did have some corridors where there was more than one corridor on top of each other that had different branches at the ends. We've basically cut those and combined them so that we, every segment of an RTP corridor has a particular designation that, you know, reflects that unique nature of that particular area, even if it was originally a long corridor. I'm gonna show these lists here, but we have them mapped on successive slides. So, you know, don't feel a need to memorize this, but we have two kind of buckets within that invest in transit service and infrastructure tier. One are what we're calling major project corridors, that's Red Line corridor, north-south corridor, Towson to downtown Baltimore, and then Bayview to Essex to Sparrows Point, eastern of Baltimore County, Hillthorpe to White Marsh via downtown, sort of southwest to northeast, and then Mondawmin to Northwest Hospital, that's the Liberty Heights Ave, Liberty Road corridor from the city out to into Randallstown. And then we have a second bucket within that tier called service enhancement corridors. These are corridors where the scope and scale of improvements that are needed are not quite to the level of a major project, but doesn't mean that investment is not needed. And that's where you would maybe look to see transit priority infrastructure like bus lanes, bus bulbs, transit signal priority. And so we have a number of corridors for that there too. We'll have those maps too. But I just also want to highlight Be More Bus, our vision for improved bus service that would increase frequency really is compatible with those corridors specifically, that the corridors where the Be More Bus identified as, you know, specifically in need of additional frequency and service align with those service enhancement corridors very nicely. And that's where the transit infrastructure investments could benefit the service investments that are envisioned in Be More Bus. So for the major project corridors, here's the map that we've been working on. Taken together with MTA's existing rail transit on the metro, these major project corridors are intended to show a vision for a comprehensive and connected premium transit network. And these are the most investment-ready subset of the 2020 RTP corridors. I want to pause here. Any questions on this map? Because I think this is a central component of the RTP. If you don't have, haven't had time to look at it yet, understand. But if anybody has questions on the map now, while we have it on the screen, be interested in hearing any of them.
Can you say a little bit more about investment ready, meaning how you define that?
So this basically means when we look at, if you were to build out a premium transit service of some sort, type to be defined, mode to be defined, would we expect that the number of people that it would serve better or newly serve is enough to warrant that investment now? And these are the corridors that were the most ready when you think about it in that metric.
And I guess I would also take the step that they're being identified for their potential to also be catalytic in terms of both, not just development, but to the earlier point, employment, job access.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of factors that we looked at when we're trying to figure out what kind of benefit and new riders and serving existing riders with new opportunities that we could see. What we didn't really use as a deciding factor is this corridor going to be a, specifically, TOD type corridor? That wasn't one of the most important factors. Not to say that it wasn't considered at all, but I wouldn't say it's one of the most important factors that we considered.
Many corridors here many of the corridors here not have any transit service?
No, all of these corridors currently have service through MTA's core bus network.
So I have a question that came across. What about community transit? For example, Owens Mills and Randallstown and Ricestown, for example, because those corridors seem to just be straight lines coming in and going out. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the thought process behind it?
So, yeah, our corridors are point to point, with service in between. We haven't identified exactly what the terminus would be in Randallstown, for example. Northwest Hospital, probably somewhere in that, Brenbrook, Home Depot area. But, this is a regional transit plan, and we certainly support, and we get, in the transit network improvements area, we do talk about more localized improvements, and, support the, local rapid transit services in identifying opportunities to better serve on the local level. But on terms of a regional transit map, we're really looking at what are the regional connections that get people, between jurisdictions or, from one major part of a jurisdiction to another. And we're less focused in this map and this sort of the major project corridors on the sort of local community connections once you get there.
I mean, if you think about, if I can, right, like, in terms of transit planning, you want a strong spine, right? So that's essentially what this map is trying to do, is create the spine. If you look at, WMATA, if you look at MARTA, if you look at transit systems across the country, they have strong corridors that are then fed in with local services. And so essentially this is trying to say, here's what the spine should be, obviously still supported by the local services, similar to how other do that. I mean, this also, just to, point this out, doesn't look that dissimilar from the 2002 rail map, right? Like the needs in the region have changed slightly, but they're still largely similar to what we were seeing previously. I mean, there's some changes here. The Sparrows Point focus was not on some of those other maps. And so we are recognizing those changes in land use and where jobs are. But by and large, the changes in the region haven't been that significant that would change that.
Okay, anything else or should I move on?
If nothing else, please move on.
Okay. So I mentioned the service enhancement corridors. I'm gonna caveat this with, we're gonna replace this map with a more graphical map as we finalize the RTP document. But we've identified those service enhancement corridors where transit priority improvements might be feasible and could benefit the service enhancements that we're looking at in BMR bus, our current service even most. That are within that transit service infrastructure bucket. And so this map shows the roadway segments where those type of treatments might be part of the picture. And this includes the service enhancement corridors, also includes the major project corridors, because whether it's an opportunity comes up in the short term to make an improvement with a bus lane or transit priority treatment along one of these roadways that's oriented along one of the major project corridors, we're not gonna say, oh, we're not gonna do that because we're, we have this, in the future as a, major project corridor. So we're trying to look at them as layered, rather than sort of completely in isolation. And to do that, we wanted to look at things with a little bit more specific geography for this map. And then finally, in this sort of major project grouping, we have some essential facility needs. Some of these you've heard about before through UMore Bus, but the RTP update identifies the facility needs to allow for additional MTA bus service and unlock operational potential. They're not corridor investments, but they support corridors and MTA service system-wide. And the RTP recommends advancing them as MTA capital priorities alongside the RTP corridors. So the two that have been called out specifically in the RTP, we think the most important are 5th Bus Division, which is a very high priority capital investment that unlocks many benefits. It is necessary for the frequency improvements that BMore Bus envisions, also necessary if we want to provide more school trippers and overall increased bus network performance. And then the other thing that's newly recommended in the RTP is downtown transfer and layover space. Our layover space downtown is currently at our maximum capacity in terms of places where buses can wait between trips on street or off street. And then service increases in Be More Bus, RTP, those will require additional layover space for the additional trips. So the RTP is recommending securing a downtown transit hub. It could be, again, off street or on street. Doesn't have any specific site or anything identified in there. But identifying this as an important transit need to go along with the corridors is something that's new in this RTP as compared to the previous version from 5 years ago. So just again, pause, any questions on the facility projects? I know they're new, so you need time to think about them. Feel pressured. Okay. We also updated the RTP strategies, so I'm going to briefly go over those updates. These are actions that are recommended in the RTP that are important to the regional transit vision, but they're not corridor investments. And so the 2020 plan recommended actions beyond corridor investment for advancing the RTP vision. They organized into the strategies. Sort of two categories here. One is we had some strategies that were updated to account for naming conventions, language that has sort of evolved since 2020, end of the pandemic. There was some sort of very pandemic focused strategies in the previous RTP. So that's one category of updates that we made. And then we have three new strategies. One is to transition transit signal priority to a cloud-based system. This is something that's we've already starting with a federal grant that will be a pilot project and hopefully bodes well for the rest of the system working out well. Identify locations for additional layover space, especially downtown, overlaps with the facility need, but the need for additional layover space extends beyond downtown. And then finally, support and coordinate with local and statewide efforts to promote transit as a TDM strategy. So more on the sort of marketing, education, awareness side. Any questions on the strategy updates? Okay. And then finally, we also updated what were called the transit network improvement areas in the 2020 RTP. These are very localized recommendations that were in the RTP. I mean, specific locations, a good example is talking about Renaissance or Oak Hills, those specific locations. So I'm not going to go through what all of them are, but they are in the document. I encourage you to scan through, read, especially for your own local jurisdiction, what's written in there. This is also where we talk about TOD in the RTP update. So we've kind of inventoried the progress that we've made on TOD since the previous RTP. The previous RTP had a very comprehensive list of locations where TOD was feasible, but there were some things that have happened over the last 5 years that maybe were not in there that we wanted to make sure we acknowledge as happening as well.
Do you mind just giving a little bit on the lot extensions? I don't have the document.
So what we talked about here are, and I apologize offhand, I don't have the list in my mind, but and Anne Arundel is the jurisdiction that has done the most. Howard has done some also, and then another good example would be in Baltimore County, the loop in Towson are expansions of the lots networks. Some of them are on the edge of our service area and have actually expanded geographically the service area that the lots are covering. Some of them overlap, like the loop in Towson, and provide more local service on a very small scale. And so those are things that we sort of want to acknowledge, celebrate the progress, and endorse continued work on those type of efforts. And each one of the jurisdictions does have a TDP that's funded and executed with our Office of Local Transit Support. And we're I think pleased with the progress that the lots have made in making their systems, adapting them and improving them over the last 5 years. So that's,
Robert, I want to, just a quick question for you, just looking at the full document. I want to make sure I'm synthesizing both the slide and the document. The document, I think, tends to be more past tense retrospective, here's the stuff that's happened. The slide sort of implies a little more of a balance between those. And maybe I just haven't looked at it closely enough, but does that comment resonate at all?
yeah, so, and maybe we can improve the language, if you have specific suggestions, I think we can work on those. The RTP update takes everything that was in the 2020 RTP, and unless it specifically says this, we're changing this, it presumes that it still is a recommendation. And so in the 2020 RTP, the transit network improvement area recommendations are extremely comprehensive.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel a need to restate all of them because it was, pages and pages worth. And so we tried to highlight where there's something new or changed. And maybe we can add some language that specifically says, somewhat like we did for the strategies, that anything that went into the 2020 RTP, unless it's specifically changed here, is carried forward.
Well, that's helpful, and maybe, yeah, so let's just make a note of that, and we can deal with it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And I think, by the way, that theme, thank you for pointing that out, and I think we've had some conversations since the beginning about whether you need to have the 2021 in your left hand and the 2025 one in your right hand in order to understand the overall plan. And I think you've tried to strike a good balance, and no complaints, but we should scan the whole packet with that question in mind to make sure that if you need the 2020 to make the 2025 meaningful, and you don't want to either integrate it completely in the text, which is a bad idea, or staple the whole thing on the back, which is a bad idea, how you somehow create that dynamic link between them so that people can sort of think of this as an update to something that has not been completely obliterated.
Okay, I think that's reasonable. Makes sense.
All right.
And then finally, we have a new 5-year implementation plan. This is the only section of the RTP that doesn't take the previous plan as a given. It's a new 5 years span, it's a new 5-year plan. And this is sort of the subset of RTP actions that we think could be achievable within a 5-year term. Even though the overall plan has that horizon year of 2045, this is that, what do we think is achievable in the 5-year term? We think it's achievable with funding levels that are reasonable, but it's not, it doesn't specifically say this is funded. That's not the purpose of this plan. Collaboration between local governments and transit agencies is going to continue to be vital. One of the things that's new in this RTP is that the implementation plan in the previous RTP was just a list of bullet points, and it didn't say who should do it, which is kind of an important thing when you're talking about implementation. So that's new. In some cases, you'll see local government is identified as one of the implementing actors. And so that's where that collaboration piece comes in, really important. We don't want to leave anybody sort of on their own, so I don't think we had any that were solo, just local government needs to do this. But we do think that having the responsible parties there is a step forward in terms of specificity and accountability for this plan. The implementation plan is divided into corridors, facilities, and strategies, and the strategies are subdivided by objective, which will be clearer once I start sort of going through them. This I will read off, and then I'll want to have a opportunity to discuss any of this before we close. So in terms of corridors and facilities, corridors continue to advance the red line through project development, continue planning and analysis for the north-south corridor, continue planning and analysis for the eastern Baltimore County corridors, and then start to conduct those feasibility studies for that White Marsh to Health via downtown corridor, and conduct a feasibility study for Mendocino to Northwest Hospital corridor. And on the facility side, looking at conducting facility planning and property acquisition for the 5th Bus Division. And start to identify one or more locations for transfer and layover space and begin facility planning for that space. And then getting into the strategies, again, these are organized by objective, so they're not gonna be all on one page. But in the overall objective, and these objectives were carried forward from the 2020 RTP of providing faster and more reliable service, adding TSP to 5 additional corridors to benefit local bus and commuter bus, implement an additional 10 miles of dedicated bus lanes, benefit local bus and commuter bus, coordinate with local jurisdictions to minimize the impact of construction projects on bus service, implement supplemental bus service along the Camden line to maintain hourly headways. That's something that's new that came about through the Mark Growth and Transformation Plan that we thought was something that is achievable within 5 years potentially, and also has a lot of benefit for this region in terms of the sort of making a reliable and sort of day-long connection between our local bus transit and the regional and sort of to our region's neighbors connections. And then advance, not complete probably, but advance construction of the West Baltimore Mark Station in coordination with the Frederick Douglass Tunnel and Red Line projects. That's something that's shared with Amtrak, as you know. In the strategy of grow ridership, continue to plan and construct additional transit hubs, intermodal transfer facilities, connect light rail, metro subway at Lexington Market and State Center by improving wayfinding and making other infrastructure investments, advancing development of the Bayview Mark Station. That's another thing that was on our radar screen, but really has come into its own over the last 5 years, and is really also endorsed in the Mark Growth and Transformation Plan. And expand Mark service hours in accordance with Mark Growth and Transformation phase. They're sort of the 5-year phase from that plan. And then support and coordinate with local and statewide efforts to promote transit as a TDM strategy. And then within the increase access to jobs and opportunities objective, create safer, more comfortable pedestrian and bicycle access to stations and stops, coordinate regional transit provider schedules, implement consistent transfer fare policies across providers, support transit-ready development by coordinating transportation planning, land use plans, housing availability, and employment opportunities. In the customer experience objective, implement an integrated fare payment system for the region's transit providers, work with partners to reduce trash along routes and maintain clean station stops and right-of-way, and install CCTV on all transit vehicles and at all rail stations and transit hubs. And then finally, community-focused strategies, partner with jurisdictions to make stops and stations and stops ADA accessible, invest in technology that allows more fare payment options, including fare capping, and actively pursue partnerships with nonprofit, philanthropic, and workforce development organizations to ensure access to transit for their constituents, and prepare for the future. Use sustainable and resilient construction practices to reduce the risk from extreme weather events, to create a workforce pipeline for transit vehicle operators and mechanics, and as we've been talking about, maximize federal funding by encouraging contributions from local jurisdictions and private sector entities that would benefit from transit projects. As a long-range plan, the RTP provides specific and focused project recommendations without capital funds. It offers steps to improve transit performance in the near term while moving towards the long-term vision of a connected and comprehensive transit network. And the actions in the implementation plan are meant to be achievable steps that will position the region to best take advantage of future resources when they become available. So with all that being said, are there any last comments or questions on the plan? Happy to hear them. Yeah, John, I think the ball's in your court a little bit. Need to work on.
Yeah, that's fine. First of all, I have one question, but are there any specific comments or questions anybody has?
Just real quick, I mean, these are great, but I think you said it earlier. Is there gonna be some kind of crosswalk with, you said it earlier, who's accountable for doing these?
So where we left it is the agency or the actors that are identified at the bottom of each bullet point. We didn't, want to be so specific as to say, Anne Arundel County needs to do X, Y, Z, because most of these are region-wide and they are, not applicable to only one jurisdiction. So that's where you see things like lots or road owners as an accountable agency.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not gonna recite what I said at the beginning about protocol. We'll get you a window of opportunity for comments and then set a date for a deadline, and we'll send out some sort of a voting thing, and then if necessary, we can ratify it at our next meeting, but I don't think that's totally necessary. My only question for you, which is sort of the mega question here, and I've asked it previously, I wanna make sure everybody hears it, is once this is adopted, what does it mean? What does it affect? Does it affect, what kind of decisions does it affect? Is it affect things in a mandatory way, in a sort of recommended way? I think it's important just to recite once more what that means. And I know Liz, you and I have had that conversation, but others, but I don't wanna launch a whole big discussion. I just wanna be clear, like, what does it mean to adopt this plan? I know the law says you have to, okay? Which is, reason to do it, but I'm talking about its practical implications.
This is a guide, and I mean, Holly or Liz, jump in if you have thoughts you want to share too. This is a guide. It doesn't mandate particular actions. But I can say from my experience working as a planner at MTA, and I think Liz would agree with me, that as a matter of what guides our work, the RTP does loom large in terms of the way we, where we look for projects, the sort of goals and objectives that we're trying to accomplish. And it also provides a written basis that's shows a regional consensus on certain things are important that we can then point to and say, the RTP says this. And, if we're engaging in a conversation about trying to advance a priority of ours, it means something that the RTP is in this. It will mean something that the BRTC has approved, the plan it has adopted. And I think that's one way in which it's very useful, and it will be, potentially more useful in the update, because the BRTC is now a body that, continues to exist rather than being a single purpose body.
I'm satisfied with that answer but I just thought it was really important as we sort of culminate here to have people hear that once again. All right, well, I'd like to move on.
Could I make
Yes, of
one
course, Liz.
super quick
Please.
contextual comment, just having worked in other markets? Because this is more of a guiding document, its value is as high and as maximized as our commitment to referencing. So I think that matters, right? If it doesn't enter conversations, if we're not leveraging it, if we're not referencing it, whether in advocacy or just in our day-to-day roles, then it does become more of the plan on the shelf versus being, something that people engage in, so.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly in response, not response, but to add on to that. I think we have a suite of documents that have emerged fairly recently that will really help us to advocate for system enhancements and expansion, which, as we know, is what the ultimate goal is here. Everything we've said about SGR is completely true, but so this document, the Be More Bus Plan, and other things like that, the commission has adopted and endorsed the Be More Bus Plan. The commission's gonna adopt this. It gives us a continuing platform to sort of give people a target to shoot at while we sort out the financing, which is, critical, essential, right? But at least it's not a generalized, everybody knows the system needs to be better or bigger or whatever. If you wanna know what we mean by that, look at this, look at this, look at that. So I completely agree with you, and I think it's gonna be important for us to be able to integrate that into our advocacy and our conversation. Okay, I think we need to move on. So let's do that. Albert, thank you very much. Liz Gordon, thank you very much for your work, the whole team. Thanks to MTA for working hard on this, and we'll figure out how to get it done.
Yeah.
October the 1st. Okay, so the remaining agenda, ending in public participation is our updates from the working groups. Don, I think you know what who's doing
Well,
what, so.
we just heard from
Yeah,
on the CMRTP, so.
Yep, yep.
The only other one that met was the lots. So I wanted to make a few remarks.
Yeah, I can give you a few updates, and it comes timely right after.
Marcus, have you been released from your ban? That's what I'm.
Not quite, it's still under protest.
He's going through the appeal process.
I'm gonna be fast. But coming timely right after Albert's conversation about what he had here, but our lots group met virtually on the 8th of August. And we had quite a few members, and we discussed what our projections are, the purpose of the task of our commission and our coordination and all with lots and of course MTA. Coordination needs, update the connection points, joining markets and integrated fare systems. It's very timely of the things that we discussed today. Data updates with bus stops and routes and refreshing data that we had going back to 2019 and 2022, those studies. The tools and branding, there's a remix tool that Jake and Don helped us to identify valuable resources of planning when we look at other hubs and spine of the routes that we want to look at. So the remix tool, Jake did, showcase on that with the GTFS feeds and the scenarios that we can use. And Trey brought up some very interesting things that he'd like to see done in Howard County. So it's very interesting to see. And as Albert did make mention, Anne Arundel County is looking at some service adjustments or expansions that'll go outside of the county itself, which we're really pretty excited about. So helping to get there from here, our little area there. But the participation was good. We do want to make sure we emphasize, keeping MTA engaged and updated. So we invite Albert to meet with us next, which is I think October 10th. I believe that's the date. It was really a good meeting that we're just really trying to stay focused and tied into the big picture and the plan of how all this ties into the regional transit plan. Don, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
I guess from the staff side, we hope to provide the commission at large is regarding some of the conversation earlier about a analysis on the CTP and hopefully provide you with some kind of top level understanding of where money's allocated by year, by mode, and some priorities. And one of the things I've been able to work on is the lots allocation. And good news is the region's receiving $31 million in the program period, and each jurisdiction is getting a lot of capital to get some resources and assets.
Thanks.
31.
31.
Marcus, thank you for your continued leadership of that, and it's great to hear it so active. It's the lots component of this is really critical to success, so thank you very much. Do we have no other reports, formal reports? I want to say one thing about the rider experience in the context of the schools. But Scott, do you have anything to report? Stuff on your report at all? I just, at the last meeting, Scott reported that the rider experience work group discussed and expressed a lot of concern about the continuing coverage and discussion regarding Baltimore City school kids and the troubles getting to school in a timely fashion, and the various reasons for that. It's received attention in the public, city council, from the mayor's office, received attention, of course, in some media coverage. And the commission expressed sufficient interest and asked me to convene a meeting of interested parties, sort of responsible parties, not in any way to point fingers, but just to sort of talk about what kind of solutions might be available to us, both small and potentially large. We recognize, and it's been said many times, that the best solution to that problem is to have more service. And I don't know how many times we've said in this meeting that more service, more resources, more expansion would be the key to a lot of different things. But in the meantime, we'd like to try and address this in some way. That everybody heard the administrator, not surprisingly, said she'd be happy to sit down and talk about it. I've since had conversations with the CEO of the school system, who's also agreed to send appropriate representatives to a conversation. And there are some others, including elected representatives at the city, and of course, Scott and me, and we'll figure out what this looks like. So it hasn't been scheduled, it will be scheduled. I don't know exactly what to expect as an outcome from that. I just know, and I think we said to each other the last time, the commission has some responsibility for trying to make that better. And I really don't know what that means, but I know that we want to try and make it better. So we're gonna convene a conversation, which was one of the functions I think we can readily perform. And we'll continue to report back to you. I do expect that by the November meeting, which is a full 2 months from now, we'll have had at least one meeting, hopefully more, and that there'll be some sort of diagnosis and, you know, even the beginnings of a prescription for things that can be done to address that, recognizing that, you know, that the solution set right now might be a bit limited considering, you know, what the real underlying issues are. But anyway, we're gonna try. So I'm just giving you that report as part of this rider experience. Okay, before we have public participation next. Any comments? Don, do we have anything else that you want to call to the commission's attention?
Not this moment.
Okay, someone needs to help me with public participation. Do we have people either here or online who wish to say anything before the commission?
No one directly signed up on the sheet.
It's the last call for that for folks.
Right. There were some online comments.
Well, there are online comments, yeah. I mean, I guess I could, I don't know if I can try, those have been sent to me mid-meeting. If you want, I'll try and.
They're all in the meeting chat, easily accessible.
Yeah, I think that's fine. So we'll just, they're in the chat, they're in the public domain. I'll consider those comments that have been made. And I will, Don, I'll ask you please just to highlight or however you want to do it. But if you could just gather those up in one place and make sure that the commission and MTA see them, you know, these were the comments that were received, so that people have the benefit of seeing them, that'd be great. Okay. Anything else? The commissioners have any new business they want to raise for the?
There's one,
Yep.
I just saw another one. Somebody wanted to comment here. Ask them to unmute, so.
Hello, good afternoon, or yeah, good afternoon.
Yes, we can hear you. Mr. Dwayne? Is it
Yes,
Dwayne?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can hear me okay?
If you could just take 2 minutes and give us your thoughts, we'd be happy to hear them.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for all the hard work. Very glad to see a regional commission for the Baltimore region being able to take some of their own autonomy, or the regions, you know, take control of the region's autonomy when it comes to transit. I just had one question. I had a few questions, but I'm gonna make this completely short because I have 2 minutes. The TOD capital grant, it is to promote equitable and inclusive development, but it doesn't seem that it specifically requires the applicants to have in their plan a very comprehensive outline of how they approach affordable housing. And as we know, I commented earlier that TOD can very easily turn into a method and a tool to stratify communities and increase the amount of the rates of car ownership, which is counterintuitive to what public transit is all about, as all of you know. So yeah, that's my quick question, and I'll see you guys at the tour, so I'll have more questions then. Thank you.
And are you, I'm sorry, I know this is great. Are you Dwayne Corey or Corey Dwayne?
Corey Dwayne.
I couldn't tell from it's kind of the two first names dilemma.
Yes, yeah, that's good.
Thank you very much. What jurisdiction do you live in, Mr. Dwayne?
Yes, sir. So currently I reside in Baltimore City. I am completely car independent, and I catch transit as my first and only mode of transportation.
Okay. I mean, is there something you can say about that? I don't want to put you in.
You know, it's appreciate.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, Sean Winkler, Policy Advisor at M.TSO. Appreciate the question, Corey. It's our first year of rolling out the TOD capital grant and revolving loan fund. We're greatly appreciative the legislators for enabling that funding to flow and partner with both local jurisdictions and private parties to advance projects. You know, I think one of the larger questions that, you know, is in the purview of this work group is how we work together with local partners to identify opportunities that allow, you know, that local land use aligns with many of the inclusionary housing goals that you mentioned. You know, and that's something we work together on with the potential sites, you know, so we can advance a framework that works for all parties.
Thank you. All right, and you may see this gentleman at the city CTP. So, okay, anything else?
Jimmy Rouse is.
Okay, Mr. Rouse, please go ahead.
Requested me read it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
What's the BRT thinking about how we could create a dedicated regional revenue stream to help fund future transit improvements?
Well, thanks for leaving me the balance of the 2 minutes to answer that question. Well, Jimmy, look, you've been a tremendous advocate of transit choices, and I've heard you talk about this many, many times. It's obviously something that we all need to think about as we go forward, and there are a lot of folks who, you know, who advocate for one or another version of that. I think that's going to continue to come up. I don't think the BRTC has ever had a discussion about it specifically. We certainly could move into that discussion. I will say that and I should have mentioned this, it's a good time to just remind everybody that the HB 517 work group, as it's somewhat awkwardly called, has started to meet. That work group comes from HB 517 in the last session. It is focused on it is called the Work Group on the Reorganization of MTA. It does not require the reorganization, but it does require recommendations and conclusions, analysis, et cetera. I think, you know, all of these issues are starting to get discussed in a more robust way because of the work that preceded this commission at the BMC. And then, you know, it's sort of iterative as we sort of talk about transit. Remember that those reports were all sort of captioned transit funding and governance. So you're talking about the funding piece. So we've not, Jimmy, had that kind of conversation directly here, but I think, you know, everybody is anxious to have all sorts of conversations about the governance issues are going to come up, the structure issues are going to come up, they're mandated to come up. I think integrated into that in some fashion is a question of funding. So I appreciate you continuing to raise it and certainly continue to advocate for what you see as the best solution. And thanks for your effort. You guys have done a tremendous job.
We have two more.
Okay, we've got yep. All right, next, please.
Thank you, John, for all the work you all are doing. We really appreciate that.
Of course. All right. Thank you. Next, Don or Jake?
Mr. Height.
Hello, thank you all for this presentation. My name is Bakari Height, Transit Equity Organizer with Labor Network for Sustainability. I currently live in Baltimore, Maryland. I had two things. One, to kind of echo Corey Dwayne's point about proper planning for TOD. I'm actually giving a tour later of Owings Mills today, and I wanted to emphasize the fact that, yes, while it is nice that there is a mix of developments at a train station, the fact that there is free parking doesn't really deter people from driving there. So I would like to echo about accelerating not only the TOD plan, but like actual proper planning of this. I'm from Atlanta, and we had a great example of TOD that we did back in the 80s, but it involved building 6 parking decks, which did nothing to try to foster that walkable development that TOD actually brings to. So that was one point. My other point is, with the CTP, does it ever address actually creating discernible transit hubs that connect people across the region? That's been my biggest complaint about the Baltimore region, is that you could get to DC much easier than you can get across town. And I never really see any kind of discernible hubs to where you can really connect into it that's outside of the elements, and that you can also transfer from one mode to the other. So is there a plan to try to determine that, whether it is involving the red line or even connecting the lines that exist now through a tunnel, kind of similar to what you see in Philly or what you do see in Atlanta with 5 Points or any of our other peer systems? Thank you.
Administrator Arnold, can you comment on that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the discussion on the RTP did include the need that MTA has identified for a downtown transit hub. It's something we've been looking at for a number of years, and it would really go a long way towards helping us to better connect bus, metro, light rail in the downtown area. We also have been looking at and studying how we can better connect the light rail and metro. It is one block, but sometimes that one block seems really far, and so how we can do that with signage or different ways of making it clearer that that one block is not insurmountable for folks. You know, the funding allocation really goes through the normal process. Our focus has been on maintaining what we have. And so that's why, you know, the funding hasn't been in there, but it's definitely something that's in the RTP. It's something that MTA would like to pursue. And, you know, because it's in the RTP, it better positions us to look at federal grants and different things like that to advance that project.
Thank you. Okay, next comment, please.
Luke Ziegler.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, so I'm Luke Ziegler. I'm associated with Vault Pop, which is a local advocacy organization, but I'm just here as myself. I just wanted to ask about for the regional transit plan. I guess I was wondering what the role might be of, I know that it's sort of a structuring document that leads to it's kind of structuring what other agencies are doing, but I was wondering if there was a role for setting, I guess, standards for achieving certain objectives. So like, for example, I was thinking about it talks about like shelters and improving amenities at stops, which is great. And obviously that's something we all want to do. But I guess my concern is that if there's not like a more specific measure set, like let's say, just as an example, like, I don't know, maybe there's 50 riders at the stop, that means it automatically should get a shelter. I guess I'm wondering, is there a role for the regional transit plan to put something like that in place? Obviously, I know it's not really like binding, but I guess just kind of a benchmark or standard for agencies, or is that sort of beyond the scope of the plan as it exists?
I can start and I may call on Liz to help me out here, but so the RTP, the last go around, we did have target goals in that, right? So like we wanted to see a certain percentage of stops have shelters or a certain number increased. We put some goals specifically on ADA accessibility last time was another big one, and that's been a focus over the past few years. So we will have goals again in the plan and making sure we're putting that there. MTA also has our bus stop design guidelines. If you just Google that, it'll come up. It's on our website that identifies and helps us to prioritize where we put shelters. There is a calculation that we use that looks at number of riders, that looks at the who is riding, what the local amenities are, right? Like you get extra points if you're near a hospital, if you're near a school, things like that, that help us to decide where to put those. We are happy, again, it's available to share that with local jurisdictions. I know the local jurisdictions make the decisions kind of on their own, but if that is a helpful document, we're happy to share that with them as well. But that is how MTA makes decisions and will continue in the future.
Thank you. Okay. Don, Jake?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. A lot of content here, very productive. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this. And please, commissioners, please be on the lookout and respond promptly to Don's email about finalizing the RTP. And thank you to MTA and to MDOT. Particularly, I know the secretary had to leave for another appointment. We really appreciate her being here both to present and to participate more generally and be able to answer questions. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second?
A second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
You'll never be.
No.